All right, welcome to the All Axxess Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen, and we're here this week with Lou DiPietro from the World Wrestling Entertainment and beyond. Lou, thanks for joining us today.
Always a pleasure to see you, Joe. How's it going?
Good, man. Good. It's it's awesome to have you here and take a little deep dive into your career and all things you. So looking forward to this. Kind of rewinding a little bit, kind of start at the beginning. Growing up as a kid, when did you first discover pro wrestling?
1986. So I'm 45 years old, so I was 6. Um, a buddy of mine in my neighborhood was a huge wrestling fan. I was a huge baseball fan. Neither of those interests really crossed over all that much at the time. So we sort of, I got him into baseball. He got me into wrestling. My cousin would come over sometimes on Saturdays, and Superstars, or at what at that point was Championship Wrestling, was on one of the local independent stations here in Connecticut at like 5 o'clock on Saturday nights for a while. So he would watch that, and then 605 TBS Superstation right after that for what was then still Mid Atlantic early on. So I kind of had a little bit of a background of it. We were one of the few people that had cable early, so flipping through MTV, I knew about the War to Settle the Score and all the WrestleMania 1 Gaga and stuff, but I wasn't really, huge into it or anything. I was 5, 6 years old. It was just cool to see, Cyndi Lauper and Hulk Hogan,
Yeah.
But yeah, around 86 or so, I started to get into it a little bit, started watching it regularly. And then Savage Steamboat. My dad ordered WrestleMania 3 for us on a Sunday afternoon. Like I said, I was almost 7 years old, and I was just like, this is the greatest thing ever. Hogan, Andre. Like, I had been watching it a little bit up to that point, starting in probably like around Christmas or so, because I got a couple action figures for Christmas. I got Hulk Hogan and somebody else, I'm sure, for Christmas that year when I was 6. Started watching it a little more seriously, and then Savage Steamboat and Hogan, Andre, and forget it. I was off to the races.
Yeah. So you mentioned Steamboat, Andre. Who are some of your other favorites as you maybe got a little bit older?
I mean, every kid my age in the 80s, I think, was first and foremost a Hulkamaniac, right? Mostly just because he was the big star. He always won. He was the fight for your right guy. He was Hulk Hogan. Loved Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Loved Roddy Piper. Oddly enough, because I thought he was just cool. Like even when he was a heel. When I first started watching, I thought he was cool. I thought Piper's Pit was cool. Early on in that era, it was more like watching the product and not really having too many favorites outside of Hulk and Steamboat and a couple other guys. Always loved Macho Man as well. Just thought he was awesome. Savage Steamboat still to this day probably my favorite match. I memorized the commentary. I've watched that match a million times. Like it's unreal. As time went on, I started to get a little more into just like cool guys rather than like cheering for all the baby faces. Yeah. So I was always a big fan of Demolition. The Undertaker is my all-time favorite wrestler. I was there at the Hartford Civic Center the night he debuted, and we were like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
So those are probably my 3 all-time favorites. If you had to narrow it down, Demolition and the Undertaker would be 2 of the 3. Kind of pick your era for who else would be on that list, but Demolition and Taker supersede any era. I still watch Demolition matches, and yeah, big fan.
Look at the ovation for Demolition when they won at WrestleMania 6. It's just unbelievable,
Yeah, even at WrestleMania 4, they were starting to get some cheers when they beat Strikeforce from the crowd of just people who got tickets because they were cool.
Yeah,
Strikeforce were these two. I love Tito, big fan of Tito. If I turned my camera around, you'd see the one action figure I have in my office, and I don't know where he is because we just cleaned the other day. But is the LJN purple tights Tito Santana?
Oh yes.
And there's a reason behind that. It's kind of an inside joke with me and my friends, but they were just these like 2 goofy white meat baby faces, and Demolition were these 2 ass kicking dudes in leather and studs that just beat the crap out of you. And it's like,
right.
Yeah, these guys are awesome.
Now, do you think we'll ever see Demolition into the Hall of Fame?
You know, I hope so. I think that in the TKO era where it's all about business, you know, Triple H has mended a lot of fences in the transition from Vince to TKO and all that. You know, guys you never thought you'd see back have come back. I mean, no one ever thought we'd see the Warrior again until he got inducted into the Hall of Fame. You know, they made peace with Brett in 2010 or 11 or whatever it was, years later. Um, you know, I think that in this era, there's a lot of people my age and our age now that have younger kids that are starting to get into the product. You know, a lot of my buddies, their children are, I mean, mine's 8. They're anywhere between, you know, 6 and 14 years old kind of thing that are getting into wrestling. And so you get those nostalgia pops from the parents. I mean, I pop when Trish Stratus comes out still just because, I mean, I've worked with Trish, but even before that, like Trish is Trish. I mean, when we were in our early 20s and Trish was at her peak, like
Yeah.
she was awesome, she was cool, she could wrestle, and she was hot, right?
Yep.
So I would hope so. You know, I would guess that somewhere along the line when they have a Hall of Fame class that needs um I'm going to say a little more juice to put it nicely, but you know, maybe the headliner isn't a superstar. You know, something like that, that Demolition gets their due because they are, I mean, 3-time tag champs. They were Vince's Road Warriors. I think, you know, people joke, oh, Coco Beware's in the Hall of Fame. Well, Pile Driver is like one of the greatest non wrestling things of all time for Vince McMahon. So Coco belongs in the Hall of Fame just for that, right? But they're definitely worthy of being there. And I hope that they can. I know it's probably mostly Bill Eadie more than Barry Darso, but I hope that they can kind of mend fences and really, you know, give Demolition that one last moment. I'd love to hear some stories of Fuji, of them just with Fuji, knowing Fuji
Yeah.
being a crazy ripper. Like, I'd love to hear some of that on the stage.
I've always been curious as to why there have been those comments about Coco Beware being in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I remember Coco getting big ovations. I mean, he was always very over, whether it was a singles competitor, even when he was with High Energy with Owen Hart, very over with the fans. Always had lots of merchandise, and he had a long run. And before that, he had the territories in Memphis, and so it's just odd that there's so much heat on Coco Beware going in the Hall of Fame. To me,
You know what it is I think that it's the it's still real to me, damn it thing. You know, like I mean, you live in New England like me, so I'm sure you're versed on Yankees Red Sox history. And there's guys that we loved as Yankees fans or Red Sox fans that were just like, I mean, Luis Soho doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame based on his merit as a player, but he's got 5 rings, right? You
right?
know, Dan Marino has 0. you know,
Sure.
when you look at football, it's like, oh, Trent Dilfer and Brad Johnson have a Super Bowl ring, and Dan Marino has none, kind of thing. Um, but you know, I think it's part of that. But when you realize that Coco was one of the most over guys, like you said, of that late '80s, the Bird was a big gimmick. Pile driver. I mean, you know, that's enough to be a contribution to the business.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the WWE Hall of Fame is more than just what you've done in the ring, because what you've done in the ring could really, I mean, could be anybody, right? I mean, you know, if Ricky Steamboat doesn't ask for time off to be with his pregnant wife, does the Honky Tonk Man have the longest Intercontinental title reign of all time? Who knows?
Right.
And he's in the Hall of Fame, right? So it's more about what you do, more than what you do in the ring. It's more about your, like you said, your contributions to the business, or specifically the business of the WWF/E as a whole. And yeah, I mean, I get it. He's in there with a lot of other guys. I mean, you know, Tito was never a world champion, but he's a multi-time tag champ, multi-time intercontinental champ, one of the greatest hands of all time. Tito could come out today and you could hear, you know, Ariba, and people would go nuts. Um, so it's more about that than just like, you know, baseball where it's like you have to hit 300 or 500 home runs, or you have to have 300 wins or 5,000 strikeouts or so and so. It's more really about like your place in the history of wrestling. And more people honestly probably remember Coco Beware than some of these guys from the 2010s who may have been, you know, 7-time tag champions. And you're like, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah.
Right. And you mentioned that being in the Hall of Fame, it's not just about in ring. When Ultimate Warrior was inducted, what was that, 2013 or 14? Basically, he wanted to see an award kind of referred to as a Jimmy Miranda Award. Behind the scenes, Jimmy Miranda was heavily involved in merchandising, among
Yep.
other positions, and just loved, be loved by the company. Um, what he wanted to see was all those different behind the scenes people recognized. And what they did is they went ahead and turned it into the Warrior Award. And I think we got a few people out of that, but not too many as far as people that actually worked for the company. But we did get to see Tim White, the first referee, and obviously he's been so much more than a referee, inducted into the Hall of Fame. Do you think we'll ever see more of those behind the scenes people like yourself, like a Jimmy Miranda, go into the Hall of Fame?
I don't know. Um, the Warrior Award was a great idea. In that, I agree with you. There's a lot of people that make things tick behind the scenes. I mean, Charles Robinson, in addition to being Little Nate and one of the most famous referees of all time, has spent the last 25 years plus, whatever he did in WCW, basically running the ring crew. And Tony Chimmel did that kind of stuff too. And you have all the set designers and the guys and gals backstage that do various things that the show can't go on without, right? I mean, that's why they give away Emmy awards and Oscars and Tony awards for set design and lighting and things like that to recognize those people. Wrestling doesn't quite have that um, category. Um, I honestly though think because of that, like, I mean, would it be cool if I ever went into the WWE Hall of Fame? Yeah. Am I worthy? Way down the list. um, but to see people like Sue Aitchison, who got the award one year, um, Sue, anyone who's worked there for any amount of time knows how hard Sue works and how much she did and all that stuff. I have some friends from the TV side that were there for 30, 40 years that we're never Kevin Dunn or that ilk, but really like just the guys that made some of the greatest graphics, or Jim Johnson should be in the Hall of Fame realistically, just for I mean, I know we know Jimmy Hart is for being Jimmy Hart and not necessarily the music producer, but Jim Johnson's the one that came up with a lot of those iconic theme songs that you can hear now and be like, oh, it's Demolition, like or whatever. I don't. Unfortunately, we don't have that cachet in the business, and so I don't really see it unless somebody does something insanely extraordinary, which was kind of the idea of the Warrior Award. Um, but of course, like then you also have Joan London and Connor the Crusher and other people who have won that award that like really embody the spirit of like what WWE does, and John Cena being the most requested Make a Wish giver of all time and things like that. So that's kind of where they make their hay, really.
Sure, and yeah, I mean, no taking away from all those individuals are certainly deserving. But it would be nice, to also see more of the behind the scenes people, like a Tony Chimmel, like a Mark Eaton, people that have
Yeah.
been there for so long.
I mean, Tim did a lot of stuff behind the scenes too.
Yeah,
Most notably, as you and I both know, and many that are listening might not, as he was Andre's guy.
yeah,
Towards the end. So he was also part of the most unfortunate parts of my career, having to post lunchtime suicide with Josh Matthews in 2006 during that series of vignettes. So it goes both ways. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of people. There's Richie and Magic, who made all the props and the belt plaques and things like that did a lot of the cool stuff that you see on the screen. That was Richie Magic. Like I said, all the set designers that have built some of those ridiculous WrestleMania sets, um, the people in public relations or marketing or live events that are out there, putting together some of these things in Saudi Arabia and other places like that. So yeah, there's a lot of people that did a lot of. There's a lot of people that behind the scenes that you look at someone and go, oh my god, this is amazing, and you're like, that's because of X, Y, and Z, and they have Bob Collins, Mr. WrestleMania, no, not too many people that are outside the sphere of the smart of the business know who Bob Collins is, but if you know who Bob Collins is, you know how important he was to
yeah.
the 80s, 90s, 2000s.
Well, you bring up Richie Magic. For those who don't know who that is, his name Richard Posner, of course, in charge of the props and magic department for so many years with WWE. He even played some. You'd see him in the background on Live Wire and a couple shows on the computer or the Superstar line if you want to call in. He was Gold Dust Usher in 1995 for a quick on TV role. So somebody like him, Richard Posner, he was there for so long. Do you have any personal memories with Richard or any interactions over the years?
Oh, honestly, most of my interactions with Richie were like checking out some of the stuff he was doing. If we were doing a spread for, the magazine or the website or something, he was always busy.
Yeah,
I mean, he was a lifeblood. He was, obviously I knew everybody to an extent, being backstage. I was on the road for a little while, but I wasn't there full time a lot. So, I'd see people every now and again or whatever. And he was always, Cole would introduce me to people like, oh, this is Louis from the website, or like, hey, how's it going? And some interactions would never go more than that, or like, hey, what's up, man? But yeah, I mean, just seeing some of the stuff he created and some of the ideas in his ridiculous Hawaiian shirts, um, you know, everybody knew who he was. He was very easily identifiable.
so let's talk a little bit about your first run because you've had multiple. Your first run with the WWE web content editor from
Mhm.
2004 until 2008. Kind of rewind a little bit. How did you get your foot in the door? How did you get in World Wrestling Entertainment? And tell us all about your position and what it was all about.
So my initial job there was as a media library intern. In the fall of 2003, the TV department hired a handful of like temporary interns to log footage for what was then and to become the 24/7 online that everyone had on their cable system that got 20 hours of random content per week or per month, that you could watch for $3.99 or whatever. Um, for that and also for WWE.com was going to start doing what was then called, if you remember, Video Jukebox,
Yeah.
where it was a monthly subscription where you could pay 99 cents to watch a match or like whatever it was $3.99 for a month to access all 8 matches or whatever we'd put up for that month, and they all had a theme or whatever. If it was February, it'd be Black History Month or Women's History Month or things. We would kind of have themes like that. So they hired a bunch of people to do that, and one of the people they hired actually was one of my best friends from college. Um, he was a year behind me, but we worked together on the TV station for 2 years. You know, became really good friends because we were both crazy into wrestling and the same things. He ended up getting promoted to one of their media librarian left, and they decided to split it into a bigger media library because they knew that they were going to need more access than just having one guy sitting there behind a computer that knew where the tapes were in the vault. Um, so he got promoted in like January of '04. Um, he gives me a call one day out of the blue around the Super Bowl, and he's like, "Hey," I'm like, "Hey, what's up, dude?" He's like, "I got a question for you." I go, "Yeah, what's up?" He goes, "You want to come work for me?" And I was like, hell yeah, I do. Because I knew what he was doing. I'm like, yeah, what's going on? He's like, well, I got promoted, this, that, we're hiring, we need a library intern, this and that, blah, blah, blah. My boss is pretty cool with me going through, people that I know and have worked with. Like, do you want to? So I'm like, yeah, hook me up. So his boss called me like 2 days later. Like he called me on a Monday night and Wednesday morning, I got a phone call from his boss. He's like, hey, I hear you're Dan's guy. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, hey, guy, yeah, well, that's good enough for me, man. Well, what do you know about the product? This, that. I'm like, oh, I've been watching for, almost 20 years, blah, blah, blah. He's like, all right, well, let's see what we can do here. I got a phone call from HR like Friday. It was like, hey, we have an offer for you to come start in 2 weeks. I was living in Florida at the time, working in, terrible radio slash fast food to pay the bills. And so I was like, all right, I need like, I'm 1,000 miles away. I need like 3 or 4 weeks. So they're like, yeah, we'll make your start date, here end of February. I'm like, cool. And I went in. So for the first 3 months, I was, bringing in tape stock for them to digitize, you know, superstars and all these various other, vicinity shows that they were going to put one episode up a month and kind of do those things. And, doing tape sweeps and in the edit rooms and all that non-glamorous television stuff that, somebody's got to do the grunt work. I ended up getting hired at the end of my internship as a media librarian. because, like I said, they were expanding. Um, and so, I spent 6 months watching wrestling for a living, which is really, really hard. Um, it was awful, just awful to have to watch wrestling 8 hours a day. And then that October ish, same thing. WWE.com was expanding. They were looking for video PAs. We were at capacity, but could definitely you know what I mean. Like the library was a little bloated. Like we could afford to lose a guy. One of our guys had gone over there to do the same thing earlier that summer. Um, and so, they came calling like, hey, does the library have any more guys that they want to send over? Because we know these guys know their stuff and all that stuff. And so my boss suggested me, because I also had a pretty good writing background. So they're looking for somebody that could do some, like, a little bit of text here and there for various things or whatever. And I went over to .com November of '04 and left in May of '08 as a senior content editor. I was working on SmackDown at the time. Um, I still remember the first thing I ever wrote was the preview for Trish and Lita at Survivor Series '04. Just one of those things that, like, hey, can you do this? Yeah, of course I can. And, oh, this is pretty good. And then, like, as the website expanded, once Vince figured out what the internet was, it was kind of like, hey, this guy can be a hybrid. I get promoted through, just life goes on.
Yeah. And now they have the WWE Vault channel, of course, on YouTube, which is kind of taking the place of some of that,
Yeah.
content that we've seen. Do you think we'll ever see shows that, until this point, they've pretty much been scrapped as far as releasing them, whether it be All American or Spotlight Wrestling, or any of those shows that were really a lot of fun to watch as a kid? And I'd love to show my kids today, but they don't exist. Mania, Action Zone.
Oh, Action Zone. I don't think they'll ever be. I mean, I know that they did for a while. They were doing Superstars. There are some legal issues there. You got to scrub a lot of music. I mean, with the changing of the logo and the branding in 2002, we lost half the Attitude Era for years, because it just, like, literally they hired 10 kids to come in and just blur out the scratch logo,
Yeah.
which was a 40-hour a week job for 10 people to produce like a year of raw. Like, it was, I mean, it's tedious. Anyone who knows anything about video editing knows it's not the easiest thing in the world to do something like that to begin with, let alone for 3 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours a show at every camera angle, has six of them in it. And so there was that. Superstars of Wrestling, there was the lawsuit with the name and stuff like that. um and I got to be honest with you, like, some of that stuff, they started digitizing because they would put up a run of 3 or 4 episodes, or we'd have to digitize, like, oh, this episode of Superstars is the one where Sean kicks Marty through the barbershop window, so we need to digitize that. Or this episode of Superstars is this is the Ultimate Warrior's debut, so we're going to digitize it because it's going to go on his DVD. That was a lot of what was originally done in the first couple years I was there. In addition to the 24/7 stuff where they'd put up a full Madison Square Garden show or whatever, and all the pay per views got digitized. They kind of had their scene. So, I mean, unless there's a donor of $1 million to put it up, I mean, as much as I love seeing that old stuff myself, like, I subscribe to Peacock and I subscribe to the network, and I'd watch the Vault on occasion, um, on the streaming service. I mean, I love the Vault channel, but you know, sometimes a random Superstars from May of 1986 just doesn't really do a lot for you. Like, if it's the 2 episode arc where Orndorff turns on Hogan, sure. If it's an episode where the Dream Team squashes Mario Mancini and Jerry Estrada, and you know, um, Adrian Adonis fights some schmuck in a mask, and not much happens, it's like, okay. It was just such a different product back then that you watch a Raw from even like 1995, 96, and they're, it's a live show and there's angles, and you look at the Nitro and those kind of things, and yeah, random challenge episodes from '93. I mean, when I was logging them for that purpose, putting them in our database, I mean, I've seen, I think, just about every move the Undertaker has in 25 different squashes over the course of a year, because he was on every other week, and it's like they literally all the same.
Yeah. And for you personally and your position, how different was it to work inside of the offices, the Titan Towers, and then also working on the road on occasion? You said you did a little bit of both. So, what were the differences there?
night and day. Different world. Um, the offices even within them, Titan Towers was a lot more buttoned up than the TV studio was, which the TV studio was across town. They're all in the big building downtown Stanford now that used to be the UBS trading floor. Like everybody's there, so it's all one big happy family. Um, but Titan Tower, the building as we know it, was a more corporate environment. Um, that's where all the IT people and the finance people and Vince and Shane and all that stuff was. The TV studio is a lot more laid back because I don't want to say it like it was always like this, but Titan Towers was the 9 to 5 Monday through Friday crowd, and the TV studio was the 24/7 365 crowd. So they had different vibes. We bounced back and forth actually with .com. I went from the TV studio as a librarian to the tower with .com, and then we moved over to the TV studio in like '05, and then we moved over to a satellite building. Then we moved back to the tower. So it was like we were bouncing all around. Um, on the road was just, I mean, I can only imagine every traveling show, whether it's a concert, the circus, the ice capades, whatever, is very similar in that it's like these people that are on the road full time spend 2-3 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 12-hour days with each other, hanging out. You become good friends, you become family. People bust each other's chops. Things were not the most savory sometimes, but you kind of knew that going in that like this is the environment. Um, and it was they were long days, they were hard days, but they were fun days because there'd just always be something going on. It was almost like by the time you got to the show, it was maybe the directors or the set dressers or things on Broadway feel the same way, that once showtime came, it was like this is the easy part of the job because we already know what's going to happen, barring something ridiculous. We can react to it. And it's like we've spent the whole day setting up and doing these pre-tapes and wandering the halls and looking for this guy and looking for that guy. And, Richie's getting the props ready and, Jason's getting the lighting ready. And if somebody's falling from the Titantron, Ellis is up there trying to show him how to fall.
Yeah.
Um, so by the time the show came, it was like, oh, this is the easy part. The movie's made. Now we just got to watch it.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. I mean, I had a blast. And a lot of the people, I've worked in sports my whole life since or around my WWE tenures. And there's just like anything else, Aaron Judge is less approachable than a middle reliever who's just happy you're coming to talk to him, right? Not that Aaron Judge isn't approachable. I'm just using him I'm a Yankee fan. I'm in New York. Like, I get it. Um, Same way. It's like, sometimes John Cena or Triple H or somebody might be busy doing this or that or whatever, but you could always find Paul London in catering and hang out with him and chat with him, and they'd want to do stuff. Again, just two names that I've worked with a lot. Um, it doesn't mean they were bad in any way. It's just John Cena is a little more in demand than some of the cruiserweights. So it all depended on what you needed to get done that day.
Any personal memories of Tim White over the years, and did you ever get to hit up the friendly tap?
I have gone to the Friendly Tap once, yes, when we did SummerSlam in Boston and then Bridgeport. That was the loop. We made a pilgrimage to the Friendly Tap on the way up to Boston that weekend. I didn't really know Tim that well. Like I said, he was recovering from the shoulder injury for most of the time I was on the road. So he was there a little bit. Obviously, the lunchtime suicide bit with Josh. So I didn't really know him all that well, but he was always very nice, very friendly. Like always, same thing. Like, oh, you guys gonna stop by? When we're coming up to the Northeast or whatever. Like he was just that kind of hospitable guy that was always wanted to make everybody feel like family.
And Howard Finkel, another mainstay for so long there, the first employee
Yeah.
with the WWF. Any memories of Howard?
How much time you
Yeah,
got?
right.
One thing many people don't know really is that in his later years, Fink ran the WWE men's softball team and the co-ed softball team. He was our
Yeah,
third base coach. So I spent a lot of Tuesdays and Thursday nights in the summers with Howard. He was kind of the WWE.com historian at that point. So he had his office was in our office, and he would send me emails about softball at like 1 o'clock on a Monday. I'm like, Howard, I'm in the middle of Raw, man. Like I can't but that's just how Howard was. He was like, he was the nicest, most genuine, ridiculous human being you could ever meet. He's the voice of my childhood. I remember saying to him one day, we were talking about him going into the Hall of Fame. I'm like, Howard, you realize that to people my age, you are what Michael Buffer or, pick your favorite sports announcer, if, you're a Joe Buck guy or this guy or that guy, like you are that to us. Like you're the winner of this contest and new intercontinental champion Ricky the Dragon. Like I can do that off of memory and know how it's like you are that guy to us. Howard's like, oh well, he would always never like want the spotlight on him. Like
Yeah.
Howard, you are that to us, man. Like you're an absolute freaking legend, dude. Like come on. He's like, oh yeah. So he was that kind of humble, just dude. And I remember, I remember one time after I left WWE, I was still playing fall softball with them, and one year they decided to do something different. And a buddy of mine that ran another team from another company in Sanford was like, "Hey, Fink told me you were available to play fall ball," and I'm like, "It's news to me." Um, he never told me that. He's like, "Yeah, we gotta go internal or whatever the situation was." So I was a little salty about that, thinking that Fink and I were tight enough that he would be like, "Hey, So we ended up playing him like that fall or the next fall, and I hit like a rocket of a double over the left fielder's head,
Huh.
and I looked right over to the bench where Howard was, and he was like, "God damn it!" Like through the book, like because I'm not a power hitter, even though I'm a big guy. I like to hit singles and do things. And I
Right.
just looked over and I go, "Put books" in my Howard impression and clapped at him because he loves Howie Rose. He's a huge Mets fan, and like I thought he was gonna cry. And I went up to him after the game. I'm like, Fink, I love you, man. I had to though. I was like, you did me dirty. I was like, I got my revenge. Like, I had to. And he's like, I know, I know. And I mean, after that, I mean, every time I saw him, big hug. Louie, how you doing? I'm great, Fink. How you been, brother? Like when he got sick, a bunch of us went up to visit him at various times towards the end of his life just to see him, and he always would have that smile on his face. He might not have known where he was or who you were at times towards the end, but he was still Fink. Um, and that's just how Howard was, man. He's literally one of a kind because you say they broke the mold when they made Howard, like he probably broke it because he didn't want anyone to be him, if
Right.
that makes sense. He
He certainly took pride in his work, that's for sure.
and like I said, I mean the winner of this contest and new intercontinental champion, like I can hear it in my head as I'm saying it, man. Like it's as iconic a call as "Touch 'Em All, Joe." You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life, and I don't believe what I just saw, and you know the band is on the field and all of those other sports clips you see in every highlight for whatever sport
Yeah.
you choose.
And as iconic as Howard was on screen and his voice, of course, all the things that he was involved with, he had his hands in so many different things backstage, and he really kept the ball moving, no pun intended. But, um, he really kept it going on so many smaller levels that, if you skipped a beat with some of those levels, it would make a difference. And he really kept a lot of things going backstage for so long.
He did, and like we've kind of said with with Charles Robinson and Chimmel and other guys, like he was the ring announcer, but he had so many other things that he did that like if you needed a guy to pitch in, Howard was your guy because he knew every facet of the business inside and out.
Yeah, exactly. So your second run with World Wrestling Entertainment was 10 years later. There's a 10-year gap there. Kind of tell us how that came about. Digital content producer, 2018 to 2020. And let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, I took the Edge hiatus there. I took 9 years off and then came back. Didn't need the neck surgery until last year though.
Oh,
Um, I did have back surgery last year. Um, so here's really where it always pays, and the one thing I will always tell people is, try not to burn your bridges, but even if you do, if you're good at what you do, that will shine through hopefully. Um, by the time 2018 rolled around and they were redoing all of the network for a relaunch of the network on its new interface, and to be honest, the WWE Network interface was out of date the day it debuted in 2014, and it was in bad need of a refresher and an update and more. You know, you look at all the streaming services we have now and how you can find just about any. You could type in 3 letters on Peacock and you'll get 97 different ideas from
yeah.
what that algorithm tells you. They were trying to do that. They were having trouble with one spot, like keeping somebody kind of had to run the whole thing. We had 20 loggers that were basically doing nothing but logging content libraries, redoing them for match ins, match outs, metadata, championships. Anytime John Cena did this, the first time in a match, we'd log it so that you could be like, I want to see all the times John Cena went like this, and 500 things would pop up, right? Um, and so the VP of digital at that point was Craig Tello, who I had worked with in 2006, 2008. He was a web editor just like me, .com. And Adam Kirshner was the head of the project, who again I had worked with for 2 years, was good friends with still for the next 10, because when you work so closely with some of those people for so long, you don't fade out of their lives. um, and they had put like something up on like Facebook or somewhere that were like, we're hiring this and that. And I was like, what is this all about? So Kirshner called me and was like, hey, blah, blah, blah. This is the role. He's like, you're kind of actually exactly who we're looking for, to be honest, if you're interested. And I was like, oh, let's talk. I mean, this was the end of the 2018 baseball season. I was working for the Yes Network at the time. My son was a year and a half old. Working a lot of nights and weekends was getting a little old. I wanted to. I figuring, hey, something a little more stable. I could watch my son grow up. I'm not going to Yankee Stadium 30 times a year. Um, so let's talk. Like, sure. So I talked to him. I talked to Craig, and they're like, it's project based, this and that, but we're going to be building out this team of people that he's like, we'll can't make any promises, but it's you. Like, we can probably find something, once this project is over. Because I was hesitant. I'm like, I'm leaving a well paying job with benefits and steady hours to make this leap to a contract job that's for a year, and then who knows. So I got all the assurances I needed that everything would be okay in the end. Made the hop back over. Um, I remember the first day I walked back in that building, and people that I hadn't seen in 10 years were like, hey, I'm like, hey, like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm back. Like, what? You know? Um, so yeah, so for 8 months, the final 8 months of the project, I was basically the pit boss, as we called ourselves, myself and the nighttime shift leader. We were the ones that were responsible for like delegating assignments, quality control, answering questions, putting in, hey, we haven't come across this wrestler yet. We need to put him in the metadata database. Okay, I'm the one like who put him in, because again, it takes someone with a unique knowledge of that kind of syntax and things, having worked in the written word, and also like, yeah, I know who Coco Samoa is, like, so from Mid South, like, you had that unique kind of perspective. So I would answer questions, and I kind of felt like it was like I joked with a lot of guys that it was my Dangerous Minds era,
Yeah.
where it's like I'm just coming, or my Goodwill Hunting era too, where I'm just coming in here and like, let me tell you guys about WrestleMania 3, right? And here's this and here's that, and like when we were logging the pay per views, and I'm like, I QC'd WrestleMania 3 in about 45 seconds, because I'm like, yep, 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 this is missing around here. Yep, 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 yep. Like, because I've seen it so many times. Um, so I was that guy for them. I was kind of like the sounding board, the leader. Like, I could explain, like, hey, they did this, but then they said this. I'm like, yes. So here's what's going to happen, because I've seen with this intimate knowledge of world class championship wrestling, because I watched it on ESPN after school every day for 4 years. Like, that was it. It was just one of those, like, it was kind of a full circle Howard Finkel role, where like I'm just like this historian slash metadata guy slash project manager slash, I don't want to say know it all, but like source of information, um, for these kids. Some of whom were wrestling fans, some of whom were like, I got hired to do a job out of school, you know. Um, so I did that for, yeah, until the project ended, and then I was kept on in a quality control role, and did a lot of the same thing, just watched wrestling for a living for a year. There was a lot of QC that wasn't done, and there's so much stuff in the library that they needed somebody to do it who knew what they were doing. So I was, I'd be the guy, like, they'd send an email like, hey, Damien Demento is in 37 assets and it's spelled two different ways. This is the official spelling. Can you go through those 37 assets and change it? Sure. Because I can do it in 5 minutes, Um, and again, for the last year and change I was there, I got to watch wrestling mostly from home on a daily basis. It was
Wow.
really, really, really hard.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
Yeah, I was very lucky.
So Stampede Wrestling was eventually starting to be released anyway. I believe it was on WWE 24/7. It was a while back.
A little bit, yeah.
And then it just kind of disappeared. It got pulled. What's the story behind that? Do you know anything about that?
There's a lot of question about who owns footages. So if there's certain libraries outside of the WWE or whatever was acquired in the WCW and ECW acquisitions, um, there's a lot of question about. There's 4 or 5 libraries in particular where there's either a big question of who owns it or who owns what or what condition it's in. Stampede is one of them. Like, Brett himself may own some certain footage, especially of himself. Some of the tapes, I mean, I can tell you that I didn't go on some of these trips, but my old boss in the media library and another good friend of mine who still works there were the leads who would go out and like inspect tape libraries when Vince was thinking about buying them and be like, Vince, there's 100,000 hours of footage, but 30,000 of them are going to snap the minute you put them on the reel. And Kevin Von Erich had world class footage in his barn in Texas. You ever been to Texas in July in an unair conditioned barn? You know what it's like. Imagine having a tape library in there, right?
Right.
Um, there was just some stuff that was unusable. Like, so a lot of places, even Jim Crockett and others, like there's gaps in the library because they just tape over stuff. Like, why was the last Battle of Atlanta? Why did it take so long to find it? Because they taped it, and then 3 years later they taped over it with a random episode of Worldwide because they ran out of tape stock. Like it just
Yeah.
no one had that forethought that 30 years later we'd have a streaming service where people would want to watch 1985 Jim Crockett. So that's the main issue. Stampede or any other is usually it's a footage rights issue. Who owns it? Memphis is another one. Like Jerry Lawler owns some, Jerry Jarrett owns some, other people own some. Um, there are just some people that don't want to sell their tape libraries, perhaps. I Given everything that went down with Randy Savage, I don't think you'll see too much of anything from ICW ever if that ever became a thing. Like that's usually 99% of the why isn't this there? It's a tape library footage ownership issue.
Gotcha. And obviously similar when it comes to rights and stuff like that for entrance music. I've always been a huge fan of the theme songs and entrance music growing up. Jim Johnson, like you mentioned earlier, just a true icon of pro wrestling music. Um, why is it that a lot of the entrance music that you would expect to be usable, they're not a big band or a big name, they're edited out and kind of you could hear the mishmash music just kind of like the Godwins, for instance, Hillbilly Jim.
Oh yeah,
Why would that be taken out and then some generic thing put over it? I always wondered about that.
you get that random banjo plinking music, and you hear Howard's terrible. Ricky Steamboat's another one because they had to
Right.
cover up Sirius with that random track. Even if you ever watch the Mid South Library on any of the on demand services, that's not the actual theme song to the Mid South Wrestling shows. That's a
Ah,
random production track. It's a hell of an earworm, but it's not the actual music.
yeah.
Yeah, again, it's rights issues. It's like, there's a lot of murkiness. One of my late jobs in the library, around the ECW acquisition actually was, I don't think I'm revealing too much here that like Harry Slash sued WWE for using his music that, it's one of those things where he licensed the rights to Heyman, but Heyman didn't have the rights to sell it, but WWE bought the acquisition, and so they're using, he had Sabu's theme song, the ECW theme song, a couple other things. Like we literally had to go through the entire ECW tape library for 2 weeks and just note every instance that Hookah Blues played, that This Is Extreme played, that whatever, how long, like, and it would be like, okay, there's 17 hours of your music in our entire tape library. What do you want to settle this lawsuit kind of thing, right? Some of the songs, like the NWO theme song, was a weird one. WCW would use some production libraries that maybe WWE didn't have the rights to. Um, so when you acquire footage from another library, some things weren't used in perpetuity. Like, um, if you look at, um, I think it was Donald Trump in WrestleMania 23, where like he had a theme song that was put in after the fact because he was using like something else. Like Floyd Mayweather was using "I Get Money" by 50 Cent, and then it became "Money, Money, Money, Money," like that stupid song,
Yeah, yeah,
because we had the rights to use that song in the lead up to and any perpetuity use of WrestleMania 23 itself, but couldn't use it. There's all kinds of weird rights and clearances issue there that that's for the legal people to meet out, and the financial people will be like, it's not really worth, like, as much as Lou and Joe like hearing Sirius when Ricky the Dragon comes down, like it's not really worth paying Alan Parsons $5 million for this. We'll
right.
just put in dun, 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 like, and we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Demolition was another one that was weird. It's like sometimes you can use it, sometimes you can't, because it was Rick Derringer, but it was on Pile Driver, so you could use Pile Driver because they wrote it and Coco sang it, but Rick Derringer wrote and sang Demolition. Like, yeah, it's just one of those things where like you would think it would be simple, but it's so not. It's nuts.
And I'm sure with a lot of fans, they don't even notice. It probably doesn't bother them. But for me, being such a theme guy, when I hear something like that, I'm like, oh man, that's not the theme, you know?
Well, I
So,
mean, look at Punk, right? So like Cult of Personality has been his theme song for 15 years now.
right.
And Tony Khan brought it with him to AEW because it's last night I was watching Saturday Night's Main Event, and I knew it was Jade Cargill against Tiffany Stratton, but you hear "It's Tiffy time" and everybody goes nuts, and then like you hear a theme song. I'm like, I couldn't pick Tiffany Stratton's theme song if you played it in the middle out of a lineup of like 50 production tracks.
Yeah.
But "It's Tiffy time," like, oh, it's Tiffany Stratton, or "I'm here to show the world." That song's awful, but I know it's Dolph Ziggler coming out. Like you had that, or
Right.
whatever, opening chorus or guitar riff, or you know. So when you hear, it's Punk, and it's like it's worth paying whatever they're paying Living Color for the perpetuity rights for him to use that, because it's a much bigger part of the show than you know uh, the Young Stallions coming out to crank it up, or whatever,
Yeah.
or the production track that Goldberg used for a little while, or the heavily recycled Hollywood Blondes theme song that like Marty Jannetty and Greg Valentine had at one point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's the same thing. Like that's just a production track. Like
Sure.
people. I remember the first time I was with somebody and we were watching a commercial or something. Like, that's the Hardy Boys theme song in this commercial. Like, yeah, it's just a generic production track. Like, it's anybody in the world can license that and use it for. You and I could buy it tomorrow, and I could give it to you as the theme song for this podcast if we
Right.
had enough money. I mean,
Yeah. I remember that the Hardys and the Hollies too, Crash and Hardcore, they had a
yeah,
generic theme like that.
yeah, and they would use them in like it'd be in like a Girls Gone Wild commercial, or like some kind of like
Right.
Bang Energy or something ridiculous, and you're like, oh, I'm like, okay, like
Yeah.
that's Bob Holly's theme song, and it's in this commercial for Chex Mix.
Right. Yeah. Another example is the Insane Clown Posse, the Oddities. They had
Mm-hmm.
to kind of throw a production over that as well, which is surprising to me because I feel like it. I mean, how expensive could it be to pay ICP for a few Oddities entrances? But
You think that, and it's like, and again, it's like we live in a world now where like the business of the business is business, is what my one of my college professors always used to say. When you're working with the ICP in 2000, 1999, when the oddities were around, and you're like, oh, like this is, we're going to use this, and this is part of their contract or whatever, and then they leave, and it's like, oh, we don't have a contract to use that song anymore, and it's like, is the oddities theme song awesome? Sure, even if you don't like ICP, it's pretty cool, right?
yeah,
Is it really worth it to pay them? I mean, Violent J and Shaggy Two Dope could be like, yeah, I want $1 million for use in perpetuity, and Vince would be like, I give you $20,
yeah,
and because that's what it's worth to me, and then you get nowhere, and all of a sudden you have some bizarre circus music over the oddities because it's not worth $1 million for the oddities.
I get that.
you know?
Yeah. So going back to the 1990 Survivor Series, Hartford Civic Center, you were there in person as a fan.
I
Take us back
was.
to that night. What was it like? You had the egg, the big hatching of the egg. What did you think as a fan was going to come out of that egg? And when the gobbledygooker came out, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, poor Hector Guerrero. Um, I mean, I was 10, so like the big egg was cool. And we were like, oh, maybe it's going to be like Ric Flair or something, like, because we watched WCW. Oh, it's going to be so and so from other, somebody jumping from another promotion or this or that. We're like, oh, it's gonna be cool. And then it was just a giant dude in a turkey suit. Not exactly the most awe-inspiring uh, moment. But I mean, that show itself. I mean, you opened with the greatest Survivor Series team of all time, maybe Ultimate Warrior, Texas Tornado, and the LOD against Demolition and Perfect. You know, you had Hogan, like you had Slaughter in his early heel phase. Undertaker was like, oh my god, who the hell is this guy? Like, you know, of course now we know it was Mean Mark and like whatever. um, but yeah, it was just like I've always loved the Survivor Series as a thing. Just like I think Survivor Series matches are cool because you get to see like, I mean, not that I would always ever want to see Coco Beware versus Ted DiBiase, but like you would never get to see it. They were never on the same plane. You know, again, not that I would ever want to see Sergeant Slaughter versus Bushwhacker Butch, but you could. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, me and my mom got tickets for me and my buddy. We were 10. Um, drove us up there to Hartford, you know, and um, that was the first pay per view I ever attended. So it was a lot different than going to either just a live event or like a wrestling challenge taping or something, which I used to go to in New Haven all the time because you know they'd be 4 hours long and you get three good matches and a bunch of you know the generic squashes and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Taker, man, just the gong hit and the funeral dirge and out comes Brother Love with this 7 foot tall guy dressed in all black that looks like he hasn't slept in months. It's like, oh my god, this guy's cool. You know, because when you're like 10 or 11 and you're almost in middle school, it's like the guys that look cool are the guys that are like, yeah, this guy's awesome. Like,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, that was something. I loved the Undertaker since minute one. I'm like, this guy's cool AF, man. Like,
Yeah.
um, you know, of course, we got to see Hogan. The only ever grand finale match of Survival, and Hogan and Warrior get to pose together. And again, like, how often was Hulk Hogan ever going to be in a match against Paul Roma? You know what I mean? Like, no offense to Paul, but he was just never
Yeah.
on that level at that point with Hulk. So, um, you know, it was cool like that. And then that's actually the Tito Santana fascination comes from Survivor Series that year. Um, in the you may remember this off the top of your head, you may not. Somebody listening may know exactly what I'm talking about. In the interview for the grand finale match of Survival in the promo that they're doing backstage with, I think it was Mooney. Hogan's talking, it's Hogan and Warriors ranting and pacing around, and Tito's just standing there looking like because he just finished wrestling, you know, 10 minutes ago. Um, in that 6 minute marathon of a final match they had that they had to get Slaughter out there to shine and then get Tito into the match so it wasn't 6-on-2 and they didn't have to job Slaughter. Um, and Hogan goes off on the Warrior and Ultimate Warrior, this guy, that guy. He's like, Tito Santana, me and the Ariba man, we've been down since day one. It's like, that's it. He's the Ariba man. We're like, we were watching that when we were like 25 or 26. I'm like, you know, because I mean, if I turn my camera, I could show you this insane collection of DVDs from, you know, I mean, that's every DVD that came out while I worked there, by the way.
Yeah.
Because we got a copy to promote it on, you know, I was producing Bite This for a little while, so we get a copy to promote on air. They drop us copies in the office, and so I have every DVD from Survivor Series 2004. Actually, New Year's Revolution 2005 is the first one I have. I don't know where Survivor Series is. All the way up to WrestleMania 24 because that
Wow.
was the last DVD that came out before I left. So Tito's been the Ariba man, and just like when one of those jokes, like somebody named their fantasy football team the Ariba Men that year, and we were off to the races. And so when my buddy turned 40 3 years ago, the two of us pitched in to have Tito Santana do a cameo for him.
Nice.
It's like, I hear you're a big fan of the Ariba Man and this and that. Like, it's just been one of those weird, like, it's our version of a meme. But yeah, we got to see the only ever grand finale match of Survival.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was fun. Like, it was cool to see something different other than a TV taping or a live event
Yeah.
at that point in time, especially then when it was Survivor Series, which I always thought was cool. So
Fast forward to present day, you see the War Games, double ring, double cage teams still striving to survive. But What are your thoughts on them kind of getting away from traditional teams? Because usually the Survivor Series, other than maybe one match, two matches, they were all 4 against 4, 5 against 5. And you don't see that anymore. You're lucky if you get one, and it's usually just the main event.
Yeah, I mean, I look forward to seeing what it looks like this year. I have a feeling it's going to be some combination of Punk, Rhodes, Bloodline, Vision, the whole main event scene, which you can do now when you have a Saturday Night's main event here, and then you have the Saturday Night's main event that's Cena's final match 2 weeks later, and this and that. WWE sort of got into a rut. I think part of what made the product so lackluster for a period of time in the last decade was like, oh, it's October, we got to have a Hell in a Cell match. It's like, okay, Undertaker versus Randy Orton at Armageddon needed to end in Hell in a Cell in 2004, right? Or the Triple H Shawn Michaels Bad Blood Hell in a Cell or whatever. Like, I don't need to see Dolph Ziggler versus The Miz in Hell in a Cell because they've been feuding for 4 months and it happens to be October. And I think WWE got away from that. And I think Survivor Series was probably an unfortunate casualty of that because it became all about brand supremacy, or there was that period of time where it was champion versus champion, which is the only time you'd ever see it, and now they do it every year at Crown Jewel, which makes no sense whatsoever if it's not a Saudi. Like the one in Australia made like, okay, it's Cody Rhodes versus Rollins, like great. um so I think Survivor Series became sort of a casualty of that. War Games is a little different animal, like probably because the bloodline has been involved in some form for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
That story just never ends. But I mean, I like War Games. I think it's great. Again, like it really needs. Would War Games be as great if it was DIY and insert other SmackDown tag team versus the Motor City Machine Guns and Frazier and Axiom? Like, no, of course not. It would just be a match that they're doing in a cage. I would love to see an old school Survivor Series one time. Doesn't necessarily have to be Raw versus SmackDown. With like I said, with it's what the 29th is Survivor Series this year, I think, and then there's SNME 2 weeks later, and we just had the SNME last night, so that's 3-4 weeks out. Like, sure, I would love to see Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed teaming with a couple of random SmackDown guys against Punk and the Usos and LA Knight. Why not? You can have a guy job in the context of a Survivor Series match, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just you got lucky on any given night. How many guys in Survivor Series history have jobbed to a clothesline? How many guys in the history of not facing Bradshaw or Stan Hansen have ever lost to a clothesline? Um, so yeah, I would love to. I mean, I'd love to see I'd love to see the MFTs against some random wild SmackDown company. Like, when else would you see Ilya Dragunov team up with Fraxium and Ray Phoenix? Like, just this wacky ass team. Like, I mean, you think about some of the great Survivor Series of all time teams, and it's like, oh, Rick Martel's Visionaries made sense. They were all managed by Slick. Like, that was or the Heenan family against Warrior in '89. And then you get like Piper Snuka and the Bushwhackers. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, look at
Exactly.
these four maniacs out there. Like, oh, Piper's teaming with Snuka. Like, what the? Or again, Ultimate Warrior to Texas, Kerry Von Erich and the Legion of Doom. If everyone but the Warrior was themselves 3 years earlier, that would have been the ultimate dream team of, you know, supercard conglomerate with the biggest star in Texas and the Road Warriors, who were Jim Crockett, like Hulk Hogan and Demolition and Jake the Snake Roberts. Holy cow! Like, what a
Yeah.
team! Like, you know what I mean? Like, and yes, you got Nikolai Volkov, the Bushwhackers, and Tito Santana at times, or the was it '91 the team that was Hercules, Skinner, Iron Sheik, and Berserker. Like, okay, like this is Jobber Central, but like it existed there to put over Duggan and Slaughter. Like, so it goes both ways. They
Yeah.
can't all be bangers, but it's fun. It's fun to see those. Like, again, when else were you gonna ever see? Has Hulk Hogan ever teamed with Tito Santana other than that? Probably not.
I don't think so.
Maybe like in like '86 if it was like Hogan, Tito, and JYD against like Savage, Adonis, and Bundy or something, like some random ass 6-man tag, right?
Right.
But you never, like, how often did Power and Glory get to interact with the Ultimate Warrior? Like, just that kind of thing was always a little fun nod to like anything can happen.
Why don't you tell us little bit about what you did after WWE, post WWE? You've been a part of coverage teams for the Super Bowl, of course, the Stanley Cup, senior content producer of WFAN.com. Tell us what it's all about.
Yeah. So in between WWE stints, I've worked for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I've been in that sphere for 15, 16 years now. I don't do as much as I used to because there's a lot of young journalists striving to get their name out there, and I'm here if Kevin ever needs me. Um, to help out with ratings and things like that. Like I'll do stuff behind the scenes. So I've been doing that for, like I said, 17 years now. Worked for NBC Sports for a little while. Did was a highlight supervisor for the Stanley Cup Finals one year. So did a lot of work around that. Um, Spent 7 years at the Yes Network where I covered the Yankees and the Brooklyn Nets. Um, and ran the website for the Yes Network. So got to work in baseball. I've worked for Vince McMahon and the Steinbrenner family. Like, how lucky can a kid who loved baseball and wrestling and grew up in the Northeast be, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I did that for 7 years. Like I said, freelanced a little bit for them while I was still working at WWE because I had nights and weekends open. So I do some social media for a Nets game or a Yankees game here or there just to stay in the sphere. Now like you said, I'm a senior content producer. We actually just got reorganized and retitled, so I forget what my actual title is now, but I'm the head of digital for 4 sports radio stations in the Mid Atlantic region. So WFAN, WIP in Philadelphia, our 2 stations in Washington, D.C. Basically, our MO is we live stream all of our sports talk radio shows. So um, we're the ones who are cutting clips from that and sending them out on the internet for you to watch of ridiculous hot takes and skits and things like that. Again, we were in full bore at the Yankees World Series run last year. We had a full contingent at the Super Bowl last year for the Birds. Um, be nice if Washington D.C. picked up some of the slack here, and one of these teams was actually any good anytime soon. But that's my life now. Is I'm the guy behind the scenes pulling the strings and helping out with technical advice and stepping in to do some of the work when I need to for some of my guys. And then, yeah, when the Yankees get to the World Series, I'll make my once every 3 years appearance at Yankee Stadium to say hi to everybody and be back in the mix just because I've earned that after 25 years in this career. But like I said, again, I have my team where, like, you know, my New York editor has been at every Yankees home game for the last 3 years in the playoffs because he's 30 years old. And when I was his age and I was backstage at WrestleMania, it was the greatest thing ever for me. And now that's passed on to him. So now I'm the boss. And, I still get to relive my glory days every now and again, but I leave that to the young kids. And I'm the guy in the office who's telling the stories. And I'm the guy who's on this podcast right now. Stories,
Right.
which at this stage of my life, like I said, I have an 8-year-old. I'm involved in my town's government, doing some stuff. I live in a small town. We do a lot with his board of education and things like that to make sure the schools are great. And now it's my time to be dad and boss as opposed to in the thick of it. So I really enjoyed the fact that that's why I left. Yes, honestly, my boss at Yes knew that. I was like, I want to be a little more 9 to 5 ish for a while. Um, and I have been for the last, I guess, 7 years or so.
And what advice do you have for somebody that's looking to get into a similar position that you've had over the years, whether it be involved in sports, radio, WWE? What's your advice for them coming in?
I mean, the right advice would be like go into something that pays more, right?
Yeah.
But no, honestly, work hard, be willing and ready to work hard. The hours aren't glamorous, the pay isn't great sometimes, but all those nights and weekends are worth it. Like I said, WrestleMania week, you'd work 90 hours, but you know what? There's nowhere I would have wanted to work 90 hours in March of 2008 than in Detroit at WrestleMania 24 or 23, you know, standing next to the stage, seeing The Undertaker's entrance in real time and getting to interview somebody who would eventually 10 years, 15 years later be the president of the United States and getting a contact high from Snoop Dogg's trailer in Orlando because he was Snoop Dogg. And we had to interview him ahead of WrestleMania 24. Like, those kind of memories and experiences are the things you carry with you. Like, man, I got to do that. Like, that's cool. Um, so work hard, be willing to work hard, be willing to sacrifice, but also like know that like the more you can learn how to do, or the more you're better at, or the more you're willing to throw yourself into, the more opportunities you can get. And like I said, don't burn bridges. Like be I'm lucky that a buddy of mine just happened to get into a spot where he was able to bring me in. It's up to you to take that opportunity and roll with it. I turned what I was doing there into, hey, Lou, I know you know how to do video. .com's looking for a video PA who could also do a little bit of writing. Well, when we did the TV show in college 3 years earlier, I was a segment producer, so good at it. Like, yeah, I'll give it a whirl, and then next thing you know, here we are. And then I leave WWE in '08, and 4 years later, my boss at WWE is at Yes and calls me. He's like, "Hey, we're expanding the digital department. What are you up to these days?" I'm working. I'm working at a fundraising company. Doing sports fundraising. Like, why? He's like, "Well, you want to come back and work for me?" Yeah, of course. And then same thing with WWE. Like, hey, like, I wasn't always the nicest person to work with at the time, especially to the two guys who ended up bringing me back in. But I had that unique skill set, and if Vince and Eric Bischoff can work together, my wife must have just taken the dog out. I apologize. If Vince and Bischoff can work together, like anybody can, and here we are. Same thing. I got laid off from WWE due to COVID because I was a contractor. I posted on LinkedIn, "Hey, I'm a free agent," whatever. Guy I had worked with briefly and knew from the Bleacher Report sphere 10 years earlier was like, "Hey, I'm hiring for this role at WFAN. You might be a fit. Do you want to talk?" "Yeah, let's go." Here we are.
Yeah.
So, it is a lot of times who you know and how you've interacted with them. And, I try to pass that forward to as many guys as I can. I tried to help as many of my guys as I could at WWE that were loggers, try to find a place for them. It's like, all this kid needs is a chance. He's really good. Like, where can we put him? Half a dozen of those guys are still there. I left almost 6 years ago. They're still there. They're thriving. They're like, and like, not that I'm out here like, hey, I'm responsible for his career, but it's also like, you know what, man, like Jay just needed a chance and now he's killing it. Like that's what makes me feel good about the career arc I've had, is that I've also been able to do the same thing that was done for me on a few occasions, and that's more than giving back. Yeah, I mean that's 25 years of a career in a 67-minute nutshell.
Right.
you know,
And two on the spot questions for you. If you had to choose top 3 matches of all time, your personal favorite.
Savage Steamboat. It's a good one. Undertaker Michaels at 26, the second one. Man, this is a good question. The triple threat at 20.
Oh yeah. Yep. Awesome. And of
With
course,
He Who Shall Not Be Named in the one of the downside moments of my career. Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at, Mount Rushmore. But what would you say is your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling?
Are we talking WWE only, any certain thing, or is it just in the 100 years that wrestling's been a thing,
Yeah,
or
I mean,
from
I
all of
guess
it?
you could do any era, any promotion, just pro wrestling in general.
I will do my life. I will do WWE because history is written by the winners, and also because it makes it a lot easier to not have to think and debate whether or not Ric Flair was better than this or that. Hogan, Cena, Austin, Undertaker.
Great
The
lineup.
three biggest stars of the three biggest eras of the WWF, and a guy who was there consistently day in and day out for 20 years is the biggest draw that would have been what Andre and other guys were to the territories in the 70s and 80s in the 1990 to 2020 WWE realm.
And the John Cena retirement tour coming to a close 2025. In your opinion, who do you think that next John Cena will be? Is it somebody that's there now? Who will that next level breakout star be? A lot of people obviously say Braun Breaker, but is there anybody else beyond that in your opinion?
I mean, Braun's a Steiner, so never put anything past him because they're just. I mean, he's a physical freak of nature and gets it. He comes from the legacy. Um, the next John Cena may not be there right now. May not be. Maybe somebody in AEW. I mean, the thing with Cena is the same thing with like Hulk Hogan was never the greatest wrestler in the world. You can watch any Hulk Hogan match, and most of them are basic, right? But he had that charisma. He had that. He was just it. He was that star. Austin, same thing. He would just show up, kick your ass, leave, drink beer, swear at you. Like he was the anti-hero. Stone Cold Steve Austin as a character in 1988 would have flopped. But in 1998, he was the hero they needed. As we saw, Hulk Hogan as the hero in 2000 was just nostalgia tour. You know, John Cena was the hero WWE needed to navigate through the PG era. So, really to say somebody's going to be the next John Cena, like there's a lot of guys on the roster right now, and there's a lot of guys in AEW and elsewhere that could be huge stars. Um, Jacob Fatu could be a huge star because people just love him and he's nuts. Cody right now is the QB1 the company needs to get them through this town. I don't find Cody Rhodes overly entertaining. I don't find him overly charismatic. I don't find him like, not that I don't like Cody Rhodes, but he's Cody Rhodes. I mean, dude was a low mid carder 10 years ago that was futzing around, and he left. He went to AEW. He formed that stuff. He came back. He understood the business. Like he's the guy they need right now. Roman Reigns could have been that guy too, but he had his health issues and the pandemic, and he showed up. Once every 3 months. So I think it's going to be somebody that wherever the direction of mostly WWE, because as great of an alternative as AEW is, it's just not the spectacle. Which is the same reason why, as great as Ric Flair is, he's maybe not held in the same regard as Hulk Hogan by many people because the NWA was a different product. It's going to be somebody that's the right person for the right time at that time. Like I said, Cody Rhodes is the right guy to be the face of the franchise right now because he's personable, he's willing, he works hard, he's good in the ring. He's not that flashy superstar, but he's that solid, that solid second player on a championship team that everybody needs. Um, or as Triple H would call Daniel Bryan, a B plus player. Who knows? But it's going to be somebody like that, somebody young who's just ready to like take off, and maybe WWE gets into a very big urban era, and Trick Williams becomes the guy as a Stone Cold Steve Austin tweener type who just is cocky as hell and beats anybody up and thinks he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and maybe Trick becomes the next big superstar. Maybe there's so many women on the NXT roster. Maybe Sol Ruka becomes the next Trish Stratus because she's just got that crazy blend of she gets it in the ring, she's athletic as hell, she's hot, like she's just that you know every little girl wants to be her. Like all those pictures you see of AJ with Bailey or AJ or Bailey with Becky Lynch and Trish, and those like all those pictures they pop up. Like maybe every little girl who's a gymnast that likes wrestling coming up in 10 years is going to want to be Sol Ruka. Um, it really all depends on the chance they're given and what the product looks like at the time and how they organically rise to the top. LA Knight is great. People love him. Decent in the ring. Got the catchphrase. He's also in his 40s. Like he's not going to be around forever. So it's catch lightning in a bottle and go. Because John Cena was on the verge of being released until he decided to dress up like a rapper and impress Stephanie backstage in 2003. And 2 years later, he was the face of the company. Right. Triple H was a jobber in WCW, came over to WWE as this random Greenwich blue blood snob. He's now the COO. Wrestling is a snake that consumes its own tail to survive,
You just never know. And in closing, two more questions, actually. Vince McMahon, what were your interactions with Vince over the years? How were they like?
Scariest dude I've ever met in a good way. Even when he tore both his quads and was in a wheelchair, he was still going to the gym daily. You'd see him in the elevator and be like, "Hey, Vince, how you doing?" And you'd still have to check your pants when you got out of the elevator to make sure they were clean because he was just that presence. He's the nicest guy in the world until you cross him and you do something that he didn't like, and then he's protecting the family business. I worked for Shane for 3 years. I mean, Shane's the same way. Shane's great, but if you messed up, you were going to hear about it because he wasn't going to tolerate that. But he'd also tell you why you messed up and be like, now fix it and we're good. And, you know, people can say what they want about working for or with Vince and Stephanie, especially extensively, because they're Stephanie's more Vince and Shane was always more Linda, in terms of personality. But, one of the crazy, you talk about road memories, right? The night Paul Heyman turned on RVD in Philly, and Big Show won the ECW title July 4th. I'm standing backstage with David Gunn, one of our photographers, and the plan was we're going to ambush Paul Heyman when he comes backstage and get like the scoop on Paul. What happened? Like, blah, blah. And it's going to be a web exclusive, and Dave's going to take the photos, and I'm going to write it up real quick, and we're going to post it, and it's going to be out. And so I went off to like grab a bottle of water or something. Like, I don't even remember why I left. And Gunner's standing there right in Gorilla. And Vince comes charging up. He's like, Gunner, what are you doing here? Gunner's like, I'm waiting for Louis D. Because that was obviously my gimmick name when I was
Yeah.
writing for the website. He's like, Louis D, who is this guy? Is he a worker? And Gunn's like, no, he's one of the web guys. We're doing a thing with Heyman. All right, carry on. Gunner has not let me forget that. That was 20 years ago, and he lives 10 minutes from me. And every time I run into him, he's like, "Hey, Louis D, my favorite worker." I'm like, "Jesus Christ, Gunner! It was 20 years ago, man." Like, but you never knew, like, if Vince was going to go off on him because he was just standing here, like, "What are you doing here?" Like, we actually are working.
Right,
Like,
right.
we're getting ready to do something. I just want to, just like you never knew, but that was Vince. Like, Vince lives, sleeps, eat, breathes, pees, poops, everything you can think of wrestling because was his life.
Yeah.
Triple H is the same way. Honestly, I know he's a little more family oriented, too. But like, I mean, Hunter is 110% everything he does. So it's a family trait.
And in closing, how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your legacy to be?
Definitely not the guy tied up in the corner with a pizza box in my lap by Simon Dean at the end of Bite This. No, Mike is still a friend of mine to this day. I was lucky enough to be down at his final match in Jersey. Like, one of those things, again, you talk about family on the road. Like, I did his vignettes. I did that with him. I was a huge mark for Nova in ECW when I was younger. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, and he's been forever grateful or friendly or whatever you want to call it, and we've been legitimately friends for 20 years now because of it. But um, I would love it if people knew my name the way they know, Eddie Elner or Stu Sachs or you know Lou Gianfrido or any of those like old school, whether it was WWE.com, magazine, PWI, like wrestling journalist people. Like, that would be cool for my own ego. But really, I would love, to me, just if my name is revered as, oh, I remember working with a guy who was great to work with and he helped out a lot. That's, I was lucky to have a lot of people that gave me a hand up. My buddy that worked in the media library and was like, hey, you want to come intern for me? Like, who knows where I'd be without that? I might still be working, might be an assistant manager at a Subway in Orlando while still working part time at a radio station, trying to make things. Who knows? But that's, as I explained earlier, that's kind of what I tried to do in my second WWE run, is like help these kids understand the business. Um, you know, take advantage of their opportunities and just be that guy who's like, hey, I've been there, man. This blows, but hey, look, I'm here now. Like, like, I get it, but stick positive. Keep the faith. Um, one of the greatest compliments I ever got, to be honest, WrestleMania 29, was that 2013? Was that whatever one was Punk Undertaker at 29?
29. Yep.
29. It all blends together after a while, man.
Yeah.
Um, WrestleMania 29 was at MetLife. So again, I was 30, early 30s. So me and a couple of buddies, we got a hotel room at the Marriott right behind the Meadowlands. And we're like, we're just gonna crash out and go to Mania and like have a good time. We went to the Hall of Fame at MSG and all that stuff. And we're in the hotel bar after the Hall of Fame that Saturday night, and it just so happened that Marriott happened to be the tech hotel because it was easy enough to truck everything across. Anyone who's ever been to the Meadowlands and knows where their hotel is, it's like across one access road and through the parking lot, and it's very easy to get to. So we're in the hotel bar, and I hear Louie. I turn around, it's Michael Cole. Cole was our boss at .com for a year and change because, I mean, anyone who knows Michael's story knows he's a legitimate, CBS News radio background, so he has a legit journalism background. He had been there for 20 years. What has been 25, 26 years now he's been there, so he had been there for a while. So he kind of took over when we got a little bit more serious, for lack of a better word, with some of our writing and some of the way we were doing things. And Cole was always the kind of guy to be like, all right, this blows. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to show you how to fix it, and then we'll go from there. Like, he always, any criticism he gave was super constructive, and like, this is why I don't like this, and this is what we need to do, and this is how you should think, and like, because he understood the business as well. Psychology is the biggest word in wrestling. Everything needs to happen for a reason, otherwise, why? So I hear his voice, and I turn around. I'm like, "Hey, Cole, what's up, man?" I give him a handshake and a hug, and Cole got me so drunk in Philly, which is one of my adopted hometowns, one night that I got lost on the streets of Philadelphia that I used to wander for 5 years drunk and knew where I was. Like, Cole was just that kind of guy. He was fun to hang out with as he was to work for.
Yeah.
And so he was standing next to Tony Dawson, who was one of the young announcers at the time, and the Tony Dawson, Tom Phillips, like that era of guys. He's like, "Hey, Tony, this is Louis D. He used to work for .com." I'm like, "Hey, man, how you doing? Pleasure." And I was with a couple other, my friends were ex-employees, like in the studio, that Cole knew tangentially. He's like, "Oh, hey, Scott, how you been?" He's like, "Yeah, this is Louis. He used to work for me on the website. He's like one of the best minds for the business I've ever worked with." It's like, wow, okay. You've been in this business for 15 years. We haven't worked together in half of those 15. And we worked together closely for a year. And that compliment came out of his mouth to a guy that had no knowledge of anything, from that era. I was like, wow, okay. Like, I really appreciate that, man. Like, maybe I do. Maybe that's what helped me get back in the door the second time. That unique skill set, like I said. But, if 30 years from now, some of those kids that I worked with in the project for the metadata relaunch speak about me on a podcast the way I've talked about Howard Finkel or Michael Cole, then I did my job.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lou, for not only your contributions into the wrestling world, but for joining us today here on the All Access Entertainment Podcast. It's been a pleasure to deep dive with you. For Lou DiPietro and for myself, Joseph Bruen, it's the All Access Entertainment Podcast. And we'll see you guys next time.